Hello. What I'm going to share with you concerns America's social polarization and what's going on in America's federal government today. It's about how we got here and what it's going to take for us to get out of this nightmare that we're living. By way of explanation, in 1997 I paralyzed myself by falling asleep while driving. That led to my studying science for several years to understand what were the roadblocks to curing my paralysis. As a result of my understanding of science, I became involved in the stem cell debates. Between 2002 and 2006, I served as a surrogate spokesperson for the G.W. Bush White House and for conservative groups opposed to embryonic stem cells and human cloning based on moral grounds. That didn't have any, my opposition to embryonic stem cell research and human cloning had nothing to do with religion, had nothing to do with morals, and it had nothing to do with politics. The only reason why I was involved was because I understood the science and I understood that vast research resources could be wasted for literally decades pursuing a research path that had no practical chances of curing anyone of anything. I was trying to warn the public that it was being exploited and used for vast amounts of money. To put this in context, it's 2025. The stem cell debates began in 2001 when George Bush came into office in January of 2001. That was 24 years ago. After 24 years and hundreds of billions of dollars that have been spent by the research industry since then through the NIH funding, nothing has been cured. On the other hand, the pharmaceutical industry has made over $1.3 trillion on the 6 medical conditions that were used as pretext for embryonic stem cells and human cloning. These were spinal cord injury, stroke, diabetes, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, and multiple sclerosis. To further put this into context, in 2002, the pharmaceutical industry made more let me back up on this. In 2002, the top 10 pharmaceutical corporations in Fortune 500 made more profits than the other 490 corporations in Fortune 500 combined. Okay, the stem cell debates were supposedly about miracle cures being blocked by religious values. And it all stemmed from George W. Bush, supposedly being morally opposed to embryonic stem cells and human cloning, killing embryos, basically. Okay, now the thing is, G.W. Bush was a Republican. Okay, because the moral issues of the stem cell debates appealed to the religious right, and because the idea of curing diseases appealed to the empathy of America's left. The whole idea of miracle cures versus religion standing in the way of miracle cures appealed to a large portion of our society because it told us what we wanted to believe about the people that are on the other side of the society than we are. It told the right what they wanted to believe about the left, and it told the left what they wanted to believe about the right. What those issues were always about was money. That's it. Always about money. They were about pharmaceutical profits being entrenched and protected for decades, because that's what's happened. I tried to warn America that was going to happen, and that's exactly what did happen. And we were somehow, through our biases and our beliefs, tricked into believing that a GOP president in the GOP political party would intentionally stand in the way of America's richest and most politically influential industry. That isn't what happened. In fact, in his most meaningful actions, who he appointed to be his Secretary of Health and Human Services and to head the NIH, Bush did the exact opposite. All of his research-related appointees made it their immediate and unstinting aim to establish and entrench institutional prioritization at the NIH of embryonic stem cell research and human cloning, while suppressing any research that threatened the embryonic stem cell and human cloning agenda. In other words, while G.W. Bush was telling his rank-and-file Christian voters what they wanted to hear, his meaningful actions gave the drug industry exactly what it wanted, ensuring its future decades of financial growth through ensuring that none of the diseases and disabilities used to hype embryonic stem cells would be cured. Now to be clear on this, I am definitely not against federal funding of the NIH, nor am I anti-science or anti-research. I've known scientists and researchers who only want to cure human diseases and disabilities as quickly as possible. What I am against is using human suffering as a never-ending pretext for industry agendas to only seek to entrench and profit from that suffering indefinitely. My stem cells and cloning activism was wholly against the corruption of our research-related industries through the influence of pharmaceutical wealth. The so-called stem cell debates were in reality a colossal social charade. We grabbed onto sound bites like religion versus miracle cures, and stem cells turned into all the cells of our bodies because they sounded good and didn't require us to look into details and think. Nor was Bush alone in his duplicity. The conservative groups that I either spoke to directly at their request or who paid for my airfare, meals, and hotel stays so I could testify at hearings or take part in debates, not only refused to breathe a word publicly about the pharmaceutical money behind the push for stem cells and cloning, but they urged me repeatedly to say nothing about it either. I was as deceived as any and as much of a pawn in my stem cells involvement as anyone else. I wanted to believe that President Bush and conservative Christians were my social allies in the stem cell debates, even if our motives differed. In reality, concerning those debates, G.W. Bush and major conservative groups were the complicit allies of powerful industries who profit from human suffering. I deceived myself because I wanted to believe what I wanted to believe, just like the left wanted to believe in miracle cures and the right wanted to believe that its social leaders and a GOP president cared more about morals than money or power. In a nutshell, the soundbite miracle cures versus religion worked so well because it told the left what it wanted to believe about the right. The Christian conservatives cared only about abortion and nothing about the sick or disabled. And it told the right what it wanted to believe about the left, that they cared nothing about prenatal life other than how they might exploit it. Through believing what we want to believe, we were all of us manipulated, exploited, and betrayed. Now it's 24 years later. Last year I wrote a book called Weaponized Division, which places what this video describes into context with climate change, COVID-19, January 6th, Donald Trump, and economic fascism. As part of my research for this book, I looked into industry projections for expected pharmaceutical revenues from selling drugs used to treat the same medical conditions that in 2001 were used to hype embryonic stem cells and human cloning. By 2033, in just 8 years, the drug industry expects to make another $1.3 trillion from the continued prevalence of these same diseases and disabilities. Why so much in so short of time? Because so many more people have these conditions and the prices of drugs in the U.S. have increased dramatically.